the director of the Jerusalem-based Kohelet Policy Forum and a law professor at George Mason University. Slightly different topic than we normally discuss. Thanks for being with us here today. Obviously, we're taking a look at the potential restrictions now coming in place by Israel's government clamping down on this democratic right to assembly and protest. Israel's done it before. I mean, during the Second Lebanon War, for example, there were periods where you couldn't gather in crowds like this, or perhaps more recently as well. Is this a truly controversial measure that the government's trying to put in place?
What's transformational is the coronavirus, which has seen broad, almost across the board cuts to basic civil liberties. And what's different since the Second Lebanon War is that today the government isn't really in charge of setting policy for basic crisis response. The relevant decisions about restricting protests and prayer have, and I think it'll surprise most people, have been made by an unelected official, not the Tsar of the coronavirus response, not the health minister, but the Attorney General. And the Attorney General has created, out of whole cloth, a hierarchy of constitutional values with protest put at the top. This doesn't come from the Constitution. This doesn't come from, from Israel's basic laws. And basically, an unelected official has imposed a set of values that govern the government's ability to respond to the coronavirus, limit it, hamper it, and may in part be responsible for having led to the lockdown in the first place.
What is it compared to what other countries have been doing? You mentioned worldwide, obviously, this is an unprecedented situation, but in terms of this infringement as it's being looked at on civil liberty, the right to assemble, where does that rank in terms of what we've seen other countries do around the world in the face of numbers that seemingly we can't bring under control?
Yeah, so many other countries have restricted protests. In the United States, protests have been put in some states under the same rules as prayers. That is to say, they need to be limited in number. You can do it from your car. But the notion of unlimited mass gathering is not something we see in other countries. But most importantly, what we don't see in other countries, these rules are made by the governments, by the democratically elected governments, which balance the rights of individuals with the needs of coronavirus response, just as they do when they when they impose lockdowns, which take away people's livelihoods. But in Israel, the Attorney General, without even bothering to write a legal opinion, makes up an entire doctrine which ties the government's hands in how it's going to respond to these crises. And this is what's led to this tit-for-tat escalation between protesters and prayer and religious interests in prayer. Normally, the government would set these priorities. But the Attorney General, imposing a political philosophy that is not evident in the Israeli constitution, has set a hierarchy that seems indeed even contrary to Israeli basic laws. There's a basic law that enshrines the freedom to work. Yet there's no problem putting much of the country out of work, according to the Attorney General.
What's your thoughts on...
there is no basic law for...
What's your thoughts on why he's doing it?
Yeah.
Is this politically motivated here? I mean, he's a guy who was appointed by the current prime minister. What's his... There's been a lot of threats, a lot of issues leveled at him, saying that he's been too political in terms of Netanyahu's criminal trials as well. But is this what's motivating him? What's your thought on what's motivating the Attorney General then?
I think the Attorney General is motivated by a sincere misconception that he is an oracle of the law, and when he looks deep into his own views, whatever he thinks is reasonable is what the law is or becomes, and that he's the only one who can be trusted to do this. I think it's pretty remarkable that the person who is in charge of determining what kind of regulations are going to be applied to protesters is not a person who anyone really in the public knows is doing this.
You think we're likely to
see...
his
views are right. And,
will we see the government overriding his opinions today, or are they going to fall in line with this?
One of the ways this works is the government, according to the Supreme Court, works for the Attorney General, not vice versa. It's unclear the extent to which the government can override the opinion of the Attorney General and then prevail in the Supreme Court, because as we've seen before, if the Attorney General disagrees, he won't defend the government in the Supreme Court. So again, the government here is a backseat driver to the Attorney General, who is not making these decisions based on any body of law, but based on pure political philosophy and consideration of his own views of what is right and proper. And there are other possible views. For example... Yeah.
No, go ahead. Please finish the sentence.
Thank you. No, for example, my colleague at the Kohelet Policy Forum, Dr. Aviad Bakshi, has written a detailed legal memorandum explaining why, indeed, protest can be restricted, which Knesset members wanted to read and rely on and have discussed at a Knesset hearing. And the Attorney General, perhaps fearing alternate views, told the Knesset they didn't have the authority to have this legal memorandum presented at a hearing in the Knesset. Only his views are allowed. It's a kind of orthodoxy that goes beyond anything we've seen with, for example, religious groups.
Appreciate the inside perspectives here. Eugene Kontorovich here, obviously a lot at stake for the country at large with these issues. So appreciate your analysis.